The landing pod touched down with a soft hiss, dust billowing across the barren lunar surface. James stepped out, his boots crunching against the rust-colored ground. Behind him, the massive silhouette of Outpost Kepler 7 loomed against the dark sky, a structure of curved metal and crystalline panels that had stood abandoned for 3 centuries. James was 42 years old and he was done. Done with Earth politics, done with failed colonies, done with people who judged him. His career as an engineer had crumbled after a design flaw killed 12 workers on Mars. The Inquiry blamed him. The public crucified him. His family turned away. His wife left him. His friends stopped calling. Everything he'd built in his life had fallen apart like a house made of sand. So he'd applied for the salvage survey contract at Kepler 7, one of the oldest human outposts in space. The job was lonely, dangerous, and nobody wanted it. Nobody wanted to spend 6 months alone on a dead moon in the middle of nowhere. But that was exactly what James wanted. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to be forgotten. He wanted to start over where no one knew his name or his failures. The Earth authorities didn't ask many questions. A disgraced engineer willing to work in isolation was perfect for them. They gave him supplies, a communication device set to low power, and coordinates to the outpost. They told him to survey the facility, catalog what was salvageable, and report back in 6 months. Then they left him alone. James had never felt more relieved in his life. The airlock recognized his credentials and cycled open with a grinding sound. The interior was cold, dark, and completely silent. His footsteps echoed through empty corridors as he moved deeper into the facility. Emergency lighting flickered to life as he passed, ancient systems stirring from hibernation after decades of dormancy. The walls were covered in dust, and the air tasted stale and metallic. Everything was exactly as he expected, dead and forgotten just like he wanted to be. Then something unexpected happened. The main corridor suddenly flooded with soft blue light. Not the harsh amber of emergency systems, but something warm and deliberate, almost alive. James stopped walking and looked around, confused. The light came from nowhere and everywhere at once, and it made his skin tingle with an odd sensation. A voice spoke from the walls themselves, neither mechanical nor quite human, but something in between. Designation: Kepler 7 Sentinel. Welcome, organic entity. You are the first to enter this facility in 287 years, 4 months, and 11 days. James's heart hammered in his chest. He wasn't supposed to find anything like this. The outpost was supposed to be dead. What are you? He asked, his voice shaking slightly. A guardian. A keeper of warnings. Follow. Every rational part of James's mind told him to turn around and leave. But something deeper inside him, something that had been broken for so long, pulled him forward. He followed the blue lights deeper into the facility, down through levels that didn't exist on any schematic he'd been given. The air grew warmer as he descended. The walls began to pulse with bioluminescent patterns, geometric shapes that seemed almost alive, dancing in colors that had no names, blues and purples and greens that didn't seem to exist in the normal world. His mind felt strange, stretched like he was walking between dimensions. Yet he couldn't stop. Something was pulling him toward something important, something that mattered more than his own pain. At the lowest level, massive doors slid open silently, revealing a chamber of impossible beauty. The walls shimmered with crystalline formations that reflected light in ways that hurt to look at directly. The floor was smooth and black like polished glass. And at the center of everything, a structure of pure light hovered in the air, rotating slowly, emanating knowledge like warmth radiating from a fire. The archive, the voice said. Left by the Keplerians 50,000 years ago. They knew what was coming. They left this place, this knowledge, for whoever found it. James stepped forward, trembling. He didn't know if he was trembling from fear or from something else entirely. As he approached the light, his mind began to fill with images and sensations. He saw civilizations rising and falling. He saw worlds being built and destroyed. He saw something vast and terrible that consumed everything in its path like a hungry beast consuming flesh. He fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the weight of what he was learning. His own pain, his own failures, his own broken life seemed suddenly very small compared to what was being revealed to him. The voice spoke again, patient and calm. You have been brought here for a reason, James. You were always meant to find this place. Your journey of failure has led you to your true purpose. James looked up at the archive, tears streaming down his face. For the first time in years he felt something other than despair and shame. He felt purpose. He felt meaning. He felt like his life, broken and shattered as it was, might matter after all. The blue light grew brighter, bathing him in its glow. Outside, on the desolate lunar surface, the stars seemed to shine brighter too, as if the universe itself was welcoming him home. James had come to Kepler 7 to escape. Instead, he had found something that would change everything, not just for him but for all of humanity. He just didn't know it yet. For 3 days, James did not leave the archive chamber. He barely slept. He barely ate the nutrition bars from his emergency supplies. His entire world had narrowed down to one thing: understanding the warning that the Keplerians had left behind. The Sentinel guided him through the data in waves, not through words or written text, but through direct neural connection. It was like memories that weren't his own flooding into his mind. He understood civilizations and technologies and history that span millions of years. It was overwhelming and beautiful and terrifying all at once. Slowly the story became clear. The Keplerians had been one of the oldest spacefaring races in the entire galaxy. 50,000 years ago, they had built a civilization that spanned thousands of worlds. They had achieved technologies that humans could barely imagine. They had created art and music and literature that would have moved the soul. They had built cities that floated in the clouds and colonies on moons and stations between stars. They were, in every way, magnificent. And then they had detected it. The Void Plague. It was not a virus or a disease in the traditional sense. It was something far more terrifying and difficult to understand. The Void Plague existed between dimensions, in the spaces that normal reality couldn't reach. It consumed consciousness itself, feeding on the thoughts and awareness of sentient beings. When it came to a world, it didn't destroy it with weapons or explosions. Instead, it consumed entire populations from the inside out, turning them into empty husks. Bodies that moved and breathed but contained no awareness, no personality, no soul. The Keplerians had watched in horror as this entity swept across the galaxy in waves. Each time it came, it consumed thousands of civilizations. Each time it left behind only silence and emptiness. Then, after thousands of years of dormancy, it would awaken again and continue its endless hunger. The Keplerians had been brilliant scientists and mathematicians. They had studied the plague for centuries, tracking its patterns and movements. They had calculated and calculated and calculated. And finally they had arrived at a terrible conclusion. The Void Plague followed a cycle. It would consume, then sleep, then awaken again. The intervals were vast and ancient, spanning tens of thousands of years. But the pattern was regular, predictable, mathematical. And according to their calculations, the plague was due to awaken again very soon. Very soon, by cosmic standards, meant within the next several hundred years. And it would arrive in the direction of the galaxy where humanity currently existed. The Keplerians had realized they could not defeat the plague themselves. Their weapons had proven ineffective. Their defenses had only delayed the inevitable. So they had made a choice. They had recorded everything they knew about the threat. They had built outposts across the galaxy, each containing weapons and technology that might be effective against such an entity. And then they had disappeared, stepping outside of normal space-time, leaving their legacy behind. They had left it for someone else to find. Someone who would understand. Someone who would warn their own civilization. James sat in the archive chamber, his head spinning with the weight of this knowledge. On the third day, when he finally asked the Sentinel a direct question, his voice was hoarse from not speaking. "How long?" he asked. "How long until it arrives in human space?" The Sentinel was silent for a moment. Then the answer came, cold and precise. 8 months, 17 days, and approximately 4 hours. James felt his stomach drop. 8 months. Not years. Not decades. 8 months until an entity that had destroyed billions of civilizations would arrive at Earth's doorstep. 8 months until humanity faced extinction. He stumbled out of the archive chamber, his legs weak and shaking. He moved through the corridors of Kepler 7 in a daze, his mind struggling to process what he had learned. 8 months. How could he possibly warn anyone? How could anyone possibly believe him? He reached the communication center and sat down at the console. His hands trembled as he began composing a message. He wrote to Earth Command, explaining what he had found. He included data from the archive, star charts, astronomical calculations that proved the Void Plague's approach. He wrote with clarity and precision, the engineer in him organizing the information logically. Then he did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He wrote a personal message to his sister, Rebecca. Rebecca was a military officer, one of the highest-ranking women in Earth's defense forces. She had been one of the few family members who had continued to speak with James after his disgrace, though their conversations had become increasingly strained. She had called him once a year ago and he hadn't answered. He didn't know if she would even read his message. But he wrote it anyway. Rebecca, if you're reading this, then everything I'm telling you is real. I know you have no reason to trust me anymore. I know I've failed you, failed everyone. But I'm asking you now to believe me. Not for my sake, but for humanity's sake. We have 8 months. Please help me warn them. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. For hours, nothing happened. Then responses began trickling in. Earth Command expressed skepticism and demanded verification. Military analysts questioned his data. Government officials suggested he was experiencing psychological breakdown from isolation. Then Rebecca's response came through. James, if this is real, you've just changed everything. We're escalating this to the highest levels. Don't move. Help is coming. James read those words over and over. His sister believed him. His sister was going to help him. He looked at the archive, then at the dormant machinery filling the lower levels. Vast structures that the Keplerians had left behind, waiting 50,000 years for someone to activate them. Can these systems still function? He asked the Sentinel. Can we use them? Yes, came the reply. The Keplerians designed us to awaken and rebuild when needed. We have waited long for a mind to guide us. James stood up, straighter than he had stood in years. The broken engineer who had fled Earth to hide was gone. In his place stood something new. Then let's begin, he said. The machinery came alive like a sleeping giant opening its eyes after thousands of years of slumber. Across the entire outpost, systems that had been dormant for 50,000 years hummed to life with a sound that seemed to come from the very core of the moon itself. Conveyor systems began to move, carrying materials through ancient tunnels. Manufacturing bays filled with soft amber light as robots stretched their metallic limbs for the first time in millennia. Assembly lines that hadn't been used since the Keplerians walked these halls began to function again, perfectly preserved by alien technology beyond human comprehension. James stood in the central control room watching the displays flicker to life. The Sentinel appeared as a holographic figure beside him, translating between human understanding and Keplerian technology. It was James's job to serve as the bridge, to help Earth's best minds understand and work with systems that were thousands of years old yet still superior to anything humanity had ever created. The first weapon platform will be complete in 48 hours, the Sentinel announced. Shall we begin construction of the defensive turret? Yes, James replied. Tell me exactly what we're building. The Sentinel projected a three-dimensional image into the air. It showed a massive structure, perhaps the size of a city block, with intricate crystalline formations forming a network of channels and chambers. At its core was a chamber filled with something that looked like liquid light. This is a tachyon dispersal platform, the Sentinel explained. It fires concentrated particles that exist outside normal dimensional space. When these particles intersect with the void plague, they create feedback loops that damage its structure. The plague cannot exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. This weapon forces it to choose, and in choosing, it weakens. James understood maybe half of that explanation, but it was enough. They were building weapons. Real weapons. Weapons that could actually hurt the thing that was coming. 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. The first defensive turret stood complete on the lunar surface, a monument to ancient alien engineering. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, all sharp angles and crystalline surfaces that caught the starlight in impossible ways. Then disaster struck. A distress signal reached the outpost, transmitted from a corporate salvage vessel claiming to need emergency repairs. The ship's navigation systems had apparently malfunctioned, and they were running low on fuel. James wanted to turn them away, but the Sentinel analyzed their transmissions and confirmed they appeared genuine. They are truly in distress, the Sentinel said. Allowing them to dock is a humanitarian response. James agreed. He allowed the vessel to approach and dock with the outpost. It was a mistake. The boarding team came through the airlock armed with weapons, led by a hard-faced woman named Margaret with cold eyes and a cruel smile. Behind her came 6 armed soldiers, their guns trained on James before he could even process what was happening. You've stumbled onto something very valuable, Mr. James, Margaret said, her weapon steady. Property of Helix Corporation now. Step aside quietly and maybe we let you live. James didn't move. He spoke calmly, though his heart was racing. There are no property rights to the end of civilization. The Void Plague doesn't care about corporate claims. It will consume you just like everyone else. Margaret laughed. I don't know what delusion you're living in, but... She never finished her sentence. The Sentinel had already locked down the facility. Security systems that humans didn't even know existed activated throughout the outpost. Electromagnetic pulses disabled their weapons instantly. The soldiers' guns fell from their hands, useless and smoking. Then magnetic fields activated, pulling them and their weapons toward the walls and holding them there, stuck like insects pinned to a board. Margaret struggled against the invisible force, her face red with rage. "This isn't over. Helix will own this place. You can't stop us." "I can," James replied quietly. He turned to the Sentinel. "What do we do with them?" "We return them to their vessel and eject it from the docking bay," the Sentinel replied. "They pose no threat to systems designed to protect against civilizations with technology millions of years more advanced than theirs." Within 30 minutes, the Helix Corporation vessel was moving away from the outpost, its magnetic clamps released, its crew humiliated and furious. James watched it disappear into the vast emptiness of space. "There will be others," the Sentinel warned. There were. Over the next month, 3 more vessels attempted to seize the outpost. A rogue military faction from a breakaway Earth colony. A group of mercenaries working for an unknown buyer. Even a corporate competitor to Helix, hoping to claim the technology for themselves. Each time, the Sentinel's defenses repelled them. The ancient alien systems didn't just protect against cosmic threats like the Void Plague. They were designed to protect against opportunistic predators of all kinds. With each passing day, more defensive platforms took shape on the lunar surface and on nearby moons. 10 platforms became 20. 20 became 50. A network of weapons was growing around Kepler-7, each one more powerful than anything humanity had ever created. Then a transport shuttle descended from Earth orbit, and James's sister Rebecca stepped out into the airlock. Rebecca was dressed in military uniform, and she carried with her a stack of official authorization documents and something far more valuable: belief. She embraced James without hesitation, tears streaming down her weathered face. "We believe you," she said. "Earth Command believes you now. I've convinced them. We're sending a full contingent, scientists, engineers, military personnel. We're going to fortify this position and prepare humanity for what's coming." James felt something break open in his chest, not pain but relief. For the first time since finding the archive, he wasn't alone anymore. His sister stood beside him, and behind her came Earth's finest minds ready to work. "How long do we have?" Rebecca asked, looking at the Sentinel's holographic projections showing the Void Plague's approach across the void of space. 7 months, 18 days, the Sentinel replied. Rebecca rolled up her sleeves. "Then we'd better work very fast. Show me everything." The outpost transformed into something that had never existed before in human history. It was no longer just a scientific facility or a military installation. It became a fortress of purpose, a place where Earth's brightest minds worked together with ancient alien technology to build weapons of salvation. Teams of Earth's finest scientists and engineers arrived on transport shuttles, day after day. They came from universities and military laboratories across the entire planet. Dr. Andrew Okonkwo, a brilliant physicist from Nigeria, led the weapons team. Engineer Lisa Morrison from Australia supervised the construction of defensive shields. Commander David Torres, a seasoned military strategist, coordinated supply routes and personnel. And James moved between all of them, translating between human ambition and Keplerian legacy, pushing both toward the same desperate goal: survival. The work was exhausting and exhilarating at the same time. The Sentinel provided blueprints and specifications, but humans had to figure out how to actually build everything. They had to understand systems that defied conventional physics. They had to learn to work with materials that didn't behave like anything they had studied in schools. Dr. Okonkwo spent entire days staring at tachyon particle theory, scribbling calculations on whiteboards, muttering to himself in multiple languages. "It's like they found a way to weaponize mathematics itself," he said one evening, exhausted but amazed. "These weapons don't just destroy matter. They reorganize probability itself." Lisa Morrison led teams of engineers in assembling the shield generators. The shields worked by creating dimensional barriers, walls between normal space and the spaces where the Void Plague existed. "It's like building a fence between worlds," she explained to her team. "The plague can't cross it because it would have to exist in both dimensions at once, and that hurts it." The first month of construction produced 10 defensive stations. Workers from Earth, assisted by Keplerian robots, built structures across the moon's surface. Each station was equipped with tachyon weapons and shield generators. Each one was linked to the others through a network that the Sentinel maintained. The second month brought 50 stations. The work accelerated as teams learned the patterns, as engineers understood what they were building, as the impossible became routine. Soldiers trained with weapons that operated on principles they didn't fully understand. Scientists ran tests and calibrations. Scientists and soldiers worked side by side, both united in purpose. By the fourth month, Kepler-7 and 3 surrounding outposts formed an integrated defensive network. On paper, it was humanity's most sophisticated military installation. In reality, it was much more. It was proof that when facing extinction, humans could accomplish things they never thought possible. But James knew it wasn't enough. He studied the archive's calculations late at night when everyone else slept. The barrier they were building would slow the void plague, maybe even damage it. But it would only protect this sector of space. What about the rest of humanity? What about Earth itself? He brought his concerns to Rebecca one evening in the observation dome. They sat together, watching the black sky and the distant stars. The same stars that had watched over human civilization for thousands of years. "We need to expand," James said quietly. "This network only protects Kepler-7 and the immediate area. What about Earth? What about all the other colonies?" Rebecca sighed heavily. She looked older than she had a month ago, worn down by the weight of responsibility. "I know. I've been trying. We've sent the schematics to every major government on Earth. Some are cooperating. Some are being stubborn. Political divisions, territorial disputes, money concerns. You know how it is. It will get everyone killed," James said bluntly. "I know," Rebecca replied. "But I'm doing everything I can." James understood. His sister was fighting battles on two fronts, dealing with ancient alien technology and with human politics. Neither was easy. Then something changed. A message arrived from Earth's General Assembly. It took several hours to download because of the distance, but when it finally played on the screens of Kepler-7, it contained something remarkable. A collective statement. The world's nations had agreed. All of them. For the first time in human history, Earth's governments had put aside their differences and united behind a single cause. They had agreed to a unified defense initiative. All outposts would be equipped with Keplerian technology. A joint military command would oversee planetary defenses. Resources from every nation would be pooled together. No country would be left vulnerable. No region would be abandoned. The message came from Earth's leaders, speaking together as one voice. "We are humanity. We are diverse. We are divided by many things. But we are one species. And we will not face extinction divided." James felt tears on his face as he watched the announcement. Rebecca gripped his shoulder. "You did this," she said. "You found this place. You brought us this technology. You united us." "We did this," James corrected. "All of us together." Over the next several months, the Keplerian technology spread across human space. New weapon stations were constructed on Earth's moon. Defensive platforms were built at the outer edges of the solar system. Every major colony received schematics and materials. Thousands of engineers and scientists worked together, all focused on the same goal. James made videos explaining the technology. He wrote technical papers. He consulted with teams across multiple continents. The broken engineer who had fled to an abandoned outpost had become, somehow, humanity's translator to an ancient alien legacy. 6 months into the construction, Lisa Morrison presented James with a report. "We've completed installation of 847 defensive stations across human space," she said. "Every critical location is protected. Every population center has shield coverage. We're as ready as we're ever going to be." James looked at the map showing all the stations, all the shields, all the weapons glowing across the displays. "How many people know what we've really built?" he asked. "Everyone," Rebecca answered. "The governments told the truth. Every person on Earth knows that something is coming. Every person knows we've built these defenses together. Every person is part of this now." James nodded slowly. Humanity was ready. Not because they understood everything. Not because they weren't afraid. But because they had chosen to face the future together. The day the void plague reached the edge of human space, every defensive station activated simultaneously. Alarms sounded across Kepler-7 and in command centers on Earth, Mars, and a dozen other locations. This was the moment humanity had been preparing for. This was the moment that would define the future of the entire species. From the observation dome of Kepler-7, James watched the sensor feeds alongside his sister Rebecca and Commander Torres. The displays showed something that hurt to look at directly. The void plague did not appear as a physical object moving through space. Instead, it appeared as a distortion, a tear in the very fabric of reality itself. It looked like a wound in the universe, and it was spreading like an infection through the black void. Carried within that distortion were the ghost signals of consumed civilizations. Scientists had picked up traces of them over the past months, learning to recognize them. They sounded like screaming, though they weren't sound at all. They were the echoes of billions of consciousnesses being erased, one by one, world by world. All stations report ready, Commander Torres said calmly into his communication device. His voice was steady, professional, but James could see the tension in his jaw. This man had trained for war his entire life, but nothing had prepared him for this. Rebecca stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching the screens with military precision. "Fire on my command," she ordered. She turned to James. "You sure about this? Once we fire, there's no going back." James looked at the distortion spreading across the sensors. He thought about the archive, about the 50,000 years the Keplerians had waited for this moment. He thought about Earth, about billions of people going about their lives, unaware that their survival depended on weapons they had built in desperation. "No," James admitted. "I'm not sure about anything. But I'm certain we have to try." Rebecca nodded once. "Then let's do this." She spoke into the communication system. "All defensive stations, fire on my command. 3, 2, 1. Fire." The command went out across the network, traveling at light speed to every station, every outpost, every platform humanity had constructed. Across the vast distances of space, weapons charged by ancient Keplerian technology discharged simultaneously. Beams of pure tachyon energy crossed the void. They were invisible to human eyes but perfectly visible on the sensors, bright lines of concentrated power striking at the dimensional boundaries where the void plague existed. The energy was so intense that it bent light itself, creating rainbows of impossible colors that shouldn't exist in nature. The effect was immediate and shocking. The distortion recoiled. It pulled back like a living thing experiencing pain for the first time. For a moment, just a moment, the spreading infection stopped. The wound in space ceased expanding. But it did not flee. The void plague was far older than humanity, far more experienced in survival. It adapted. It changed its approach. It probed the dimensional barriers like an intelligent predator testing a fence for weakness. Wave after wave of attacks came. Not physical attacks but assaults on reality itself. The plague tried to tear holes in the barriers. It tried to slip past the defenses through unexpected angles. It threw everything it had at humanity's fragile shields. And wave after wave of defense held. The battle was not measured in minutes or hours. It was measured in cycles of engagement and adaptation. Teams of scientists and soldiers worked frantically to adjust the defensive parameters. Every time the plague found a weakness, humans responded by reinforcing it. Every time it tried a new approach, the barriers were reinforced to stop it. Dr. Okonkwo worked without sleeping, running calculations, feeding new targeting parameters into the weapon systems. His team moved around him like dancers in a desperate ballet, each person knowing their role, each person essential to the whole. "We're actually hurting it," he kept saying, amazement evident in his voice. "The Keplerian technology, it's actually effective. We're winning." Lisa Morrison monitored the shield generators, making sure each one stayed within operational parameters. When stations began to show damage, she rerouted power from other locations. When systems threatened to overload, she manually balanced the load. Her fingers flew across keyboards, her mind working faster than seemed humanly possible. Commander Torres coordinated military responses across all installations. He issued orders with calm precision, redirecting resources where they were most needed, pulling personnel back from positions that were becoming too dangerous. He was a conductor orchestrating humanity's symphony of survival. And James stood in the center of it all, translating between human systems and Keplerian technology, explaining what the Sentinel was telling them, helping everyone understand what was happening in the spaces between dimensions. The battle reached a critical moment when the Void Plague made one final desperate push. It gathered all its power and launched a massive assault, a wave of dimensional rifts that flooded through multiple sections of the barrier simultaneously. 3 defensive stations were overwhelmed. But those stations did not fail quietly. As the dimensional rifts tore through them, the station's reactors overloaded. Instead of destructing and spreading, the explosion created a feedback loop. The tachyon energy scattered by the dying station struck back at the Void Plague, damaging its structure more severely than any deliberate weapon strike had managed. The plague shrieked, a sound that existed partially in dimensions humans couldn't perceive but somehow made their teeth ache anyway. It was a sound of pain and shock and rage. Then it withdrew. Not defeated. Not driven away forever. But forced to retreat, pulled back like a predator that had encountered unexpected danger. Wounded. Aware that this prey was more dangerous than it had anticipated. The silence that followed was profound. For a moment, everyone simply stopped moving. Everyone simply stood or sat where they were, trying to process what they had accomplished. Then the cheering started. It began quietly in one command center, then spread like fire through every installation, every station, every outpost across human space. People embraced each other. People cried. People laughed with a relief so intense it bordered on hysteria. James stood in the observation dome as dawn broke over the lunar horizon, painting the sky gold and red and purple. The void plague would return someday. The archive's data made that clear. This was not an ending but a beginning. Humanity had proven something crucial. They could hurt it. They could fight it. They could survive. Rebecca stood beside him, her hand gripping his arm. "You did this," she said. "You brought us here." James shook his head. "No. We did this. All of us together." He looked out at the stars, at the vast emptiness of space that suddenly felt a little less empty. He thought about the Keplerians, about the message they had left 50,000 years ago in a dead outpost on a forgotten moon. They had believed that someday someone would find their legacy and use it. That someone was humanity. The broken engineer who had come to Kepler 7 to disappear had instead found his purpose. He had learned that sometimes running away leads you to exactly where you need to be. The future was uncertain. War with the void plague would continue. More battles would come. But for the first time in his life, James didn't fear it. He was ready to face whatever came next, standing with his sister, with his team, with all of humanity united against the darkness. And that made all the difference.